Welcome back, Screamers, to another episode of Introspection and Existential Crises.
As the world comes crumbling down, the two stalwarts are here. The Wilhelm boys are here to keep you straight.
The Wilhelm boys are here to tell you why you should have an existential crisis as well. So
Right, you can do it at home.
Yeah. While you're listening to this podcast, as a matter of fact. And to that end, we have a real hodgepodge of films today.
I was going to say the exact same thing, using the exact same words. This is a fucking menagerie of different films. And it's weird too, because when I was coming up here, I was just like, man, I'm always worried whether or not, and it's whether we can pontificate on some bullshit for 2 hours is never really the issue. But
right. We are full of enough bullshit.
But this will be a challenge. We'll see how it goes.
You think so?
No. I don't know if it's a challenge. It's just so widely differing films that it's...
So the first one we're going to talk about, unless you want to change the schedule that we haven't talked about at all.
No, please.
So we're going to talk about Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, which was screened at the latest meeting of the Fort Worth Film Club. And then we'll shift gears and look at a couple new films, Master Gardener, Paul Schrader's latest, and Mark Jenkin's Enys Men. But look, before we even get into the film discussion, I believe that you made a new friend.
I did.
A famous friend.
I made 3. Well, I made 2, and one didn't look up because he had a busy day. Which I've actually met Jason Mewes before. He did this movie called Nether Beast Incorporated with Steve Burns from Blue's Clues.
Okay.
It's this really small, never released independent film that is out there somewhere in the ether. And it's Office Place kind of, if I remember correctly, some sort of like Office Place comedy / thriller class, whatever. It was fine. It was I saw it at the Dallas International Film Festival way back in the day. And I happened to come across Jason Mewes and his lady friend at the time in the hallway. And I said, hey, I really liked your film. And he said, cool. Thanks.
Awesome.
But no, I met over the weekend. Dallas had a fan expo, a Comic-Con, if you will. I had missed Texas Frightmare because I was out of town. I actually saw and got to sit in a Q&A for John Carpenter, which was interesting and always kind of rare because he doesn't quite do those much anymore. So it was fun to see him in person and then watch They Live on the big screen. But I met...
Did you run out of bubblegum?
I did. And all I did was kick ass from there ever since. So I met Jason Lee, and the Dallas Fan Expo had a pretty big swath of Clerks people. And I narrowed it down because I had a Mallrats poster that I wanted to get signed. And so I stood in line for Jason Lee, and I stood in line to see a kind of a dual signature, which was best bang for your buck kind of thing for Kevin Smith and for Jason Mewes. And
who do you think was like latching on to whom?
You make a good point. I don't know. I can say,
hey, let me sit here with you.
I can honestly say I don't think either one of them needs the money, but I think if someone was going to run out, I would hedge and I would say Jason is probably the odds-on favorite. Just in general.
But what if, Kevin Smith does like collectibles, doesn't he?
He does.
So that can be a pretty expensive hobby.
But that's true. A good point. I think he mostly sells these days. So
he's offloading those Beanie Babies and Funkos.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
The Jason Lee part was pretty funny. Just because a couple people in front of me. And you know how these things go. You just go up and you.
No, I don't go to them. I'm kidding. I'm joking.
My kids are into it.
It's okay. Own it.
Shamik Moore was there.
Yeah.
And so, and I didn't actually get to meet him. His line was, of course, it happened to come on, the tail of Across the Spider-Verse coming out. And so his line was huge.
I wonder if there were any like dope fans there.
That's what I wanted to go and talk to him about. I would have really loved to spent time talking to him about dope. And then asking about Oreo and like because that's like that would be the one thing that I want to kind of spend time with him on. But and he looked really cool. Like he just had a cool vibe to him.
He does. Yeah.
And some Tate got to meet him, but I didn't hit that line. So I'm standing in line for Jason Lee, and a couple of people ahead of him When they were talking about My Name Was Earl, and I just overheard the last part of the conversation, and it was, basically they were saying, they ended us on a cliffhanger, blah blah blah. But Greg, I forget the last, the showrunner, and he was like, they're trying to get something going, like some sort of like, either Kickstarter or some sort of like closure movie type thing going. So, and we'll see if it ever comes about. So when I walked up to him, I said, hey, if you ever do get that off the ground, like, how are you going to explain how Randy got all jacked? And then like Jason smiled and like laughed a little bit, and he was like, oh, you know what? That's a good point. It's like, I bet Greg will come up with something really good. And then he just went right into Earl mode, like the voiceover. And it was like, looks like Randy found a free membership card on the ground. It's like, and he got really good at it too. And it was just so cool, like hearing Jason Lee, like in the Earl voice, just like kind of dive right into that. And we both laughed a little bit, and cool. Had a moment.
Did he offer you any chocolate-covered pretzels?
He did not. We didn't really talk too much about Mallrats, but, and I heard people in front of him too. That was one of the girls that was in front of me. The specific one right in front of me was talking about Mallrats, and how he was like, that was my favorite because that was my first film set and kind of thing. So I stood in line for a good. This was ridiculous. It was a really long time for Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes, and then they were busy the entire day. But I walked in. And, I showed Kevin my poster, and he was like, oh, this is really cool. I've never seen this one before, which is kind of rare. Mm-hmm. And I talked to him a minute, and it was just, just kind of general small talk. And I just said, it was really nice to meet you. And he said, it really was, it's nice to meet you too. And we shook hands. I was just like, I was taken aback by like how genuine he is. I don't even think it seems. I don't even want to it's just like, and I think he's gotten to this like weird like post almost dying, and like and also in this realm of like he's basically doing everything that he's wanted to do from a cinema perspective and from a movie perspective, and however you feel about the movies. And I think we've talked about this before, but I don't feel that great about the movies, and that's okay. I mean, for the most part, but like it's just like connecting with him for like 60 to 120 seconds. It was just like the look is like a direct stare into your eye, and it's like it's good to meet you. I don't know. It was like really bizarre. You don't really, and like Jason Mewes didn't really look up from the signing. He was like, oh, this is a cool poster, and just kind of signed it and went on. But he was clearly distracted the entire time that he was signing things for people. And but like Kevin was like, it's just crazy how good he is at that, and like just genuineness of I don't know. You just don't get it a lot. Like it was taken aback, and like as critical of I have been of Kevin's movies as of late, I find it like it was shocking's not the right word, but not even really surprising. It was just kind of maybe refreshing and just I don't know. It was like you don't really get that a lot in those types of environments, or at least when you do, it's rare. And for him to like have met hundreds of people that day and throughout the weekend, been busy the entire time, for him to like be present in the moment is pretty impressive, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to say that those things are shocking, refreshing, surprising, and all of that. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that, because I don't know that this age of celebrity lends itself to that anyway. So when it does happen, even again for just a minute or two, to actually feel like somebody really cares that you came out to get a poster signed, I mean, I think that's worth reflecting on or noticing. Unless he's just a really good actor, but we've seen Live Free or Die Hard, and I mean, he's fine. He's fine. And I mean, I joke because that's what I do, but I mean, I do think there's something to be said for a moment of genuineness, right? A moment that feels real, especially having done that all day.
And it's weird too, because he's got a certain type of fandom that I kind of recoil from. Mm-hmm. Not that I judge people for loving things heavily. I really don't. But it's that kind of fandom. There's a sports radio station here in town called The Ticket. And it's fine. The hosts on it are really, they're really good. They've got a really good rapport. They've been doing it for, I mean, some of them are better than others, but the ones that have been there the longest are really, really impressive in what they do. The fandom that surrounds them, who kind of lives and breathes it, is just a little overwhelming. And also parroting lines and things like that, just to get to be, it just, I don't know, it's not what I'd like to be a part of. So like Kevin Smith's fandom, I kind of like, and like unabashed love for basically anything I kind of recoil from as well.
Right. But this is something that we've talked about on this podcast as well. I'm sure we haven't talked about it as eloquently as others have, but that's not really our job. But this idea of fandom and almost like a sycophancy, right? Where everything these people do is fantastic. As long as you do it the way that I want you to do it. But as soon as you don't, then we kind of have this backlash and almost go into attack mode. But there is also that kind of living through. I was thinking about this earlier, and don't ask why, this is just what I do. But I was thinking about how I think myself in particular, I tend to frame life through various forms of art, right? Whether that's a painting, a movie, music, literature, whatever. I mean, I see life reflected in these things, and I kind of use my experience to think about, talk about, and then go back to, if that makes sense. So there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think there is maybe something disturbing in completely living inside of, right, without any kind of reflection to what else is going on around you. Right. And I think that's what you're recoiling from, of the parroting lines, of the only being able to talk to your quote unquote idol in that language, in that kind of speak, like in Kevin Smith speak, right? And not making like joke references around a table, but like meeting the person and just being like, remember that time when Brody,
the Chris Farley show, right?
Right. That was awesome.
But not even like, like Chris Farley.
Right. But not even satirically, just like real. Yeah. And I think that's where that ticket, that fandom, the parroting, that's where it almost becomes problematic.
Right. Yeah. And anyway, so that all being said, Christy Brinkley was there. She looks amazing for a woman of any age. She's still, the Uptown Girl has still got it.
I was just going to say, right? I was just going to. Now but I actually have like Christy Lee in my head, the song Christy Lee in my head. If you can think of any worse Billy Joel songs to get stuck in my head, please let me know.
I don't know. We Didn't Start the Fire is not my favorite. So and I think even Billy hates that song now at this point.
I wonder if Billy hates his own songs. I'm getting off topic.
No. And there's reason not to. Please.
This is true. Did you ever listen to Jacob Dylan's music?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Oh, right.
I've seen him in concert.
Okay,
so.
Me too. Oh, that's great. This makes perfect sense, right? But there was a Rolling Stone article soon after I think that Wallflowers album came out, and it was an interview with Billy Joel, because I think Billy Joel had something coming out at the same time, and Billy Joel did not like the Wallflowers album. And this is what Billy Joel said: "I like hard rock, not soft cock."
That's a weird.
And I know. Well, one, that's just
I don't
a
really
weird.
know why I'm laughing, and then it's just like I don't even know how to process that line.
Because it's an uncomfortable, weird line. Right? I mean, like you said that in an interview. Not prompted. You just talked about this record and why you didn't like it. And this was your reasoning. And I'm thinking, okay, but you're Billy Joel. And when I think of hard rock, I do not think of Billy Joel.
I don't think even Billy Joel would think he's...
I know. That's such a weird...
Look, I love Billy Joel. I'm not gonna... I do. I grew up on Billy Joel. So this
has been a great run on this podcast. We almost got 25 episodes in.
But I don't equate him as anything other than dad rock. I mean, at best, right? I mean, it's just...
Even when he was 24.
Right. Because at that point, he was right into his doo-wop phase. It wasn't even as like hard, as like trying to break through phase. This isn't Glass Houses. This is, straight into, it's not even 52nd Street. I mean, shit, so.
Look, wasn't The Stranger really kind of when he...
That was like his magnum opus, right? I mean, like...
But it was an early one, too.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was. But I think that's the one you got Italian Restaurant on, and like what would can be considered his, probably his, I don't know what is considered his, like, I mean, he has a whole greatest hits album, but like.
He's got like 3 of them, doesn't he?
Yeah. And it's like a double album. I don't know. It was just right in my wheelhouse. Like when he did, like after Rocky 3 and he went over to Russia and did the live album, and like, I don't know, I like Honesty, man. That's a fun song. So
No. Look.
I'm not going to be ashamed of liking Billy Joel, right?
No, like what you like. I'm fine with that. I'm just going to give you. You know who else I don't like? I mean, and this is really not like a Lebowski plug, but I really don't like the Eagles.
Yeah,
I really do. I mean,
right.
I remember being in high school and having friends who just loved it. I'm like, really? I'm like, why? But I think "Peaceful Easy Feelings" the most boring fucking song I've ever heard. Anyway,
yeah, no.
Look, I love 8-part harmonies.
There's so many more interesting bands other than the Eagles that came out in that time frame. The Eagles just were a perfect storm of they were popular, and then when they weren't, dad rock radio was popular. Mm-hmm. And so they got played incessantly, and then that was basically it. So, I mean, it's not like you're talking about people who like have bizarre fandoms or like, yeah, when people coming up to them and talking to them about things like that. And I can't imagine like, other than the fact that it's made them insanely wealthy. Like, can you imagine being Jimmy Buffett? Can you imagine having to, I mean, like, and again, I would love to have the money, don't get me wrong.
Sure. But having to deal with that fandom.
But having to, and also play Margaritaville
over and ad nauseum.
You can never not play it.
You have to. It's probably in his contract.
Oh, I mean,
and like every concert writer, you must play.
You don't have to play 2 songs, like Come Monday and Margaritaville, and that's basically it.
I did like the James Gang. Yeah. Joe Walsh's band before the Eagles. I think Joe Walsh is problematic, but that's a different, but the James Gang was interesting.
So you saw Robert Motherwell?
I did. I really liked it. I mean, I like Motherwell's work in general.
This is a installation at the Modern at right now. If you happen to go listen to this and you want to go see it,
yeah, it's
pop
really
on over. It's really good. 53 pieces of his, I think, or something along those lines.
Yeah, I didn't catch the number, so that's good. But it spans his carear.
Yeah,
and it's got like early
really,
stuff.
Yeah, that was what was really interesting.
Did you go see it?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We went last Friday.
Oh, excellent.
He was prolific right up almost till his death. Yeah. I mean, so that was pretty impressive. And it does a really good job of like compartmentalizing where he was in his life when he was painting these particular things. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, I that's what I really liked about it. I thought it was really well curated and really well put together to see his kind of progression and how he got into this kind of abstract, pure kind of painting and playing with color. And I mean, his early stuff reminded me a lot of like Agnes Martin's work, mm-hmm. and also Sean Scully's work, another artist who they had a big show of a year and a half ago or so. Yeah. But I thought it was great.
So check it out if you're in the Fort Worth area.
Yeah, and the catalog's good too, so go buy the catalog. But this is not an art podcast.
It's not.
I don't know.
It's not. It's not a music podcast. It's it's not a Comic-Con podcast.
I don't even know what this podcast is.
At times, it's hard to listen. It really is.
Should we talk about some films?
Let's talk about movies. Let's talk about The Hidden Fortress. 1958, Akira Kurosawa, Toshiro Mifune, and remind me of the actresses. Do you have it? I mean, this was her acting debut. Young Princess Yuki.
Misa Uhara?
That sounds correct.
Yeah,
yes,
Misa Uhara.
Yes.
I mean, I whether or not I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, that's what it looks like to me. Okay, the story follows 2 greedy peasants in feudal Japan, Tahi and Matsuichi, who are returning home from a failed attempt to profit from a war between neighboring clans. En route, they encounter the remnants of the defeated tribe that consists most notably of a famous general and a princess who are hiding out in a fortress in the mountains. General Rokuroda Makabe and Princess Yuki need to escape into allied territory with their large supply of gold so they can rebuild their shattered clan. To do this, the peasants are tricked into helping them with the promise that they will receive a large share of the gold when the destination is reached. Along the way, the general's prowess is put to the test as he must guide the 4 and later 5, with the inclusion of a freed slave, through close encounters with the pursuing enemy. And out of difficult situations, the bumbling peasants manage to get them into.
So, what'd you think about The Hidden Fortress? No, so this is obviously, so we watched this as a part of a a Lucas before Luke type screening. We were doing some George Lucas influences. So all throughout the month of, and actually weirdly enough, it coincided with us talking to Devin Goodman and talking about Star Wars as well. And then we watched the Dam Busters as our virtual screening, which was another influence on Lucas, specifically the trench run at the Death Star. But as you watch the Hidden Fortress, you are clear to, I mean, from the scope of everything to the R2D2 3PO character to the princess, and Luke Han amalgam essentially in the general. You can see where Lucas drew most of his inspiration for his story from the Akira Kurosawa movie. Also straight up stealing the side swipes and camera movements, and so this is clearly a Star Wars precursor that this is a blueprint for that Lucas used for Star Wars. I mean, so
100%. And I think that's how I came to actually see this film. So I mean, years and years ago,
right?
First starting to, I think, get into art house cinema, classic films, whatever you want to call them. Coming across something that was like, oh, these are the films that inspired Star Wars. And it's like, okay, well, let me go check that out. I think by this point, I'd probably seen Seven Samurai and maybe some other Kurosawa. But then this one, finally, seeing it, you see just, I mean, the direct parallels in it. But it's so good. I mean, I love this film. It is nonstop. It's just a really good action film as well.
Right. It's almost to the point where you wish Lucas had have cribbed more than he did, right? Because Yuki is as self-assured and as how strong-willed Princess Leia is. Princess Yuki knows her shit way more than Leia, even Leia does, and given the same age, and there's this scene at the beginning where the generals basically let his sister go off and pretend that she's Yuki, and then she gets killed. And so that's a good thing in this case because they think Yuki's killed, so they won't go off and look for her again because this war is still going. And Yuki is extremely upset and is saying that her life is not less important than mine just because I'm royalty, and she does that throughout the film of like just kind of knowing, I mean, like not overstating her place because it just happens to be royalty. Whereas you play it with Star Wars, Leia doesn't really have a chance to play up her royal, because again, she's thrown into a situation where it's no longer even important. Her it can be used. It can very smallly be used against her. And by the time you get to Empire, she is completely, they're completely entrenched with the rebel forces. So there's no really reason for her to be Princess Leia at this point.
Right. And even as she's always as strong-willed as she is in Star Wars, she is still a damsel in distress. She still needs saving, where I think Princess Yuki here, and I think Kurosawa does this so much through her kind of like the way he physically depicts her on screen, where she towers above people, right? I mean, she stands kind of on this cliff looking above people, arms akimbo, and just like straight up erect and strong. And she's like that throughout the entire film. She never puts herself above anyone else, even as she understands the reason why Mifune's sister had to kind of sacrifice herself. She's still sort of indignant about this. This isn't how this should work, which I think she's showing kind of all of the hallmarks of what we want a good leader to be, right? To understand that sacrifice is also needed on their part, right? Not just on those who serve them. I really like how he plays and subverts with the silent woman trope in this film. So there's a part in the film where she has to play mute and kind of trick people into thinking that she is just a peasant. And so she can't speak because like the way she speaks will give her away, right? She's too eloquent, she's too intelligent, all that stuff. Even silent, the way she acts with her face, the way, again, like her physical movements, the way that she, physically moves around the set it's a show of strength, right? It's a show of female strength and a show of female power.
Yeah, yeah. I think too. I mean, not to like really tear down Star Wars as opposed to the Hidden Fortress, but I think the Hidden Fortress is funnier. I think it's more grand in scope, and to Lucas's credit, he didn't have the ability to do what Kurosawa was. I mean, like, I don't necessarily know if he had the budget to do what Kurosawa was attempting to do. The scene where they are, the two peasants are trying to find each other in the midst of the these two warring factions on this huge stairwell that are tearing each other apart. I don't know if it's reasonable to expect Lucas to be able to pull off something on that scale. But there's nothing in Star Wars, save maybe the final trench run, that has as grand of like scope, and also like the way that it's being shot. Like there's the scene where Mifune is riding the horse, and he's got the sword, on his, he's up and he's hunting down the opposing forces so they can't tell them that they're still alive, and he's basically riding to gun them down, and then runs into basically a faction of all of them and has to fight an old nemesis of his. None of those scenes, and it's surprising to me. I guess you get a little bit of that with Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, but the sword play in Star Wars is so much less and so much more stilted, because you've got someone who's in, basically a robot costume, and and an older Alec Guinness who is not, who's not necessarily going to be known for his physical prowess, right? So I mean, like, them fighting is not going to be. So you get more swashbuckling action in Star Wars, but just to see Mifune and like his physicalness of it is just so impressive, right? And that really long, drawn out, any which way you can kind of fight scene between the two samurais. It's just, I don't know. It's so much it's just so well done. I think one of the things that would have served Star Wars a little bit better too, had it have been really continually told from the aspect of C-3PO and R2-D2, right? Or Arturo, as we were last time. Because that's one of the things that was so different, and what Lucas took inspiration from. But that was one of the things that was so different about this story, is that it's a story about a kind of a damsel in distress who obviously has power in her own way, and a man who has to carry her across the lines. But it's being told from a lower class viewpoint, and from a scoundrel's viewpoint as well. I don't know if there's a way to make R2-D2 and C-3PO scoundrels in that sense without actually making them human. Right. But to tell it from a story because you lose that once you get to Obi-Wan. Like, it's a story told from C-3PO and R2-D2 story until you get down to Tatooine, and then at that point it's Luke's story, right? I mean, it's the hero's journey. It would have been interesting to see that hero's journey, especially, and again, I know you don't have all of this story being told now, but like, now that you know the entire 9-movie arc, and you know where those two characters exist in the entire, at least within the first 6, it would have been interesting to see that knowledge base of like, oh, we can, and especially, it's hard because R2-D2 doesn't speak English, right? But,
I think that's the trouble, is that, because I think on one hand it could be really, really fascinating to see this point of view of just these robots, just these droids, right? Who have some human-like qualities, but of course aren't. And like you said, R2-D2 just speaks in bleeps and bloops and whirls. The other thing I really like about the Hidden Fortress in terms of the point of view from these two peasants and scoundrels, is that they're never really redeemed.
No.
I mean, I say redeemed, but I mean, like, in terms of that hero journey, they never, like, they're always kind of shitheels, even up until the very end. But I like that kind of complication too. I mean, they end up getting a kind of reward for their help, but it's almost like they didn't help really that much. They were more of a hindrance than anything. And in constant sort of, there was always this constant danger of them turning on these other people, which, I mean, they do, but like to no end, right? To no sort of like reward of their own. And so, I mean, so C-3PO and R2-D2 would have obviously better character, right? Their characters of better moral upstanding. But yeah, I mean, I wonder. I mean, is Star Wars a better story told from the outside?
It's hard to say, right? I mean, given 50 years or 40 years now at this point.
But speculation is a hobby.
But that scoundrel aspect and this desire to get money, that whole character trait is put on Han Solo, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's his story of being this outsider who you never really know whether or not he's going to turn or not. And see, again, another thing that would have made Star Wars a little bit more interesting is keeping Han Solo a little bit more in the grays, right? Mm-hmm. It's more interesting. And I guess I think the problem with Star Wars is that it's such a simple story. It's so cut and dry. There's way more going on in the Hidden Fortress than in Star Wars. Star Wars, you've got to get this to, this point to this point, and that's basically it. And you get a little bit, I think, with that with Lando going into Empire as well, where now he kind of does what Han does in Star Wars, where he goes off and like leaves because he's not getting, his money's paid and he's done. The fact that he comes back again, that's his redemption arc, and of course now that Lando saves Luke at the end, that's his redemption arc as well. There's that a little bit of uncertainty, I think, would have helped those characters a little bit. And I guess maybe sitting in 77 and you don't know that Han's going to come back, and maybe knowing that now, when a little bit of retrospect helps out, right? Sure.
I also don't, I don't feel like Lucas is that kind of filmmaker or kind of that kind of artist either. I don't think he has. Look, I don't want to imply that Lucas only sees the world in binary oppositions, but
we've all seen Howard the Duck. We understand how it works,
right? But closer to that than maybe Shades of Grey. What do you mean? There's something else than just good or bad? I don't understand. So,
yeah, what I find interesting, and the entire month of like looking at those influences. It reminds me of like a good rap song and how they are able to, like, a good a good producer who can pull all together all these samples and like slow them down, speed them up, and construct a completely different thing. And even if you're using just a 6-second drum beat or just it's crazy how the vision that it takes to pull all of those pieces together and put together something completely new. I don't think Lucas, I think Lucas's genius, like we said last week, is really the machinations behind doing the special effects, and I don't think anyone's going to say that Lucas is an amazing storyteller. The stuff that Lucas did, that probably is held up as the best stories really are the Raiders pieces. And that's the stuff that he's working with Spielberg on.
Right. Where he really is sort of being more of a producer at that point. Right.
And if you look at, the storylines is Star Wars alone. It really, Empire Jedi written by completely different. I know he has story input, so I think Lucas's strength is being able to, have the vision to know what he wants on screen, and has the ability to create the technology to put all that together. Yeah, I don't know. I lost my thread there.
So Lucas is Dilla, Jay Dilla.
Yes. But I guess, looking at that and like
episode 4 is his donuts. Is that what's
right? But watching something like the Dam Busters and like seeing how he's taking pieces of that and then still doing the trench run and there's a couple of other like World War II aerial movies that they throw in together like that. It's interesting, the pieces to me that he pulls out from the Hidden Fortress. I don't know why the camera transition spoke to him. Because that would have been really the first time American audiences are seeing that, right? And then and you don't really see it anywhere else. Roger Christian does it in Battlefield Earth to much lower results. And it's kind of like shocking because you're like, oh, this seems to be Star Wars, and I'm not sure how we're tying these together, but yeah, it's that piece of it, and like what kind of why he chose to kind of crib that maybe it was just really just a callback to make sure people understood that this was an influence and to kind of go back and look at the Hidden Fortress. I mean, because really, that's what all of these homages, I would hope Lucas wanted people to do, is to go back and review the films that influenced him. Why else make Star Wars if you don't want people to go back and look at Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and why do it if you don't want people to go back and look at Tarzan and why make or all these other like serials, these Western serials? Why make Indiana Jones? I mean, it's there's no reason, right? I mean, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that when you make a kind of collage or a kind of pastiche, you want people to see the reference, right? You want people to go, oh, that's where he got that. But also, I mean, and we do this, artists do this all the time, where they see something that someone else is doing and sort of, like it and appreciate it, and then go, how do I include that in my own? How do I make that my own? How do I take that style but put my flavor on it, right? Or turn that into my very own thing? And I think that's what Lucas is doing, and I think that's
valid.
That's fair. Oh, yeah. All right. Anything else you want to say about? I mean, I know
look, it's a great film.
Like,
I don't know what it's like. It's like kind of breaking down Casablanca, right? I mean, it's all been done before, and it's just, I mean, like, what are we going to add to this?
Right.
Like, go watch. If you haven't seen The Hidden Fortress, go watch A Hidden Fortress.
It's fantastic.
It's really good.
Okay, so let's talk about Master Gardener. Let's talk about Paul Schrader's third entry into the Lonely Man trilogy.
The Nandina is a species of flowering plant native to Eastern Asia. The smell at certain times of the year gives you a real buzz. Like the buzz you get just before pulling the trigger.
I have a favor to ask.
What is it?
My grandniece. I would like you to take her on as an apprentice. She dropped out of school and then she ended up in a bad crowd.
You'll learn how to garden. Are you satisfied with the life that you have?
Why would you ask that? You talk a lot of shit, but there's one thing you don't talk about.
What's that?
Yourself.
Well, there's not much to know.
You put the deep 6 on 9 bad guys.
Oh, well, it was a long time ago.
Even if they're dead, you're not forgotten.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Why would you say that?
Take off your shirt.
You are impertinent.
Maya's just finding her own way.
And I'm the Queen of Scotland.
Gardening is a belief in the future. A belief that things will happen according to plan. Who did this to you?
What are you gonna do?
Time to start a new life.
I have created this life. Filled it with rules. Now seems the time to break one.
Aren't all of his films
So yes,
entries into the Lonely Man?
yes, and that's why I found it so funny that people kept calling this like, this is the bookend to his Lonely Man trilogy, and I'm like, but like he's been kind of making the same film over and over, which is fine.
Right.
I don't mean to say that is a bad thing, because, I mean, again, right, we keep coming back to these things that are important to us. We keep telling these stories to find out something new. So,
And so to that end, and speaking of what we just spoke of, I do think that Schrader is making these films as clear homage to Bresson.
oh, sure.
And I don't know, as a crusty old man, I don't know if he reads reviews. I don't know if he goes back and listens to critiques or criticisms or just analysis. Look, Paul, if you're listening, let us know. Reach out. We would love to have you on. We've got you've got an open spot here anytime.
We will, yes. And I'll tell you what, we'll come to you.
Right. No, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I know that you're living in a very special apartment building in New York now.
but we've always got reason to come down.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But it has to, like we talked about in the first Reformed episode, it has to drive him crazy just a little bit that people aren't saying, go watch Bresson. Go watch Bresson. Like if you like these movies, you have any sort of connection to them whatsoever. Seriously, what are you doing? Go watch Bresson. They're all on the Criterion channel right now, most likely anyway. Just go and turn them on. It's weird to me that every review doesn't start with Paul Schrader is ending his career with a series of love letters to the man who inspired him to make films. And maybe Schrader doesn't want that. Maybe he wants these to stand on his own, but I cannot imagine that being the case.
Well, if I made films, I would want my name spoken in conjunction with Robert Bresson.
Right.
Right. I mean, I would want people to say that in the same kind of breath. Because again, Schrader is an original. I mean, this is not the fact that he is. No, right. But I think that too often, right, people will mistake what he's doing for, I don't know, copying or mimicry, too much. And I mean, no one serious is going to think that about Schrader's films. But I mean, I do think that, he wants people to notice that he wants people to see the influence here. I mean, the guy wrote a fucking book on transcendence, right, in film.
Right.
And because it's not just Bresson, but it's also Dreyer, I think, to a big extent. Maybe, I guess Uzo is the other one he wrote about. But,
right.
But you're right. We see so much more Bresson in his films than we do.
Especially these last three.
Yeah. And again, going back to, we talked about Pickpocket and American Gigolo. We talked about Diary of a Country Priest and An Affliction. Not Affliction. I keep doing that. And I mean, it's the same thing here, right? But again, it's a variation on a theme.
Right. You want to give us a breakdown?
Yeah. Let's do that. So horticulturalist Narvel Roth tends
These do feel like you put these into a randomized Bresson name generator.
I know.
Like, what month were you born in? Like, what Pokemon
what street did you live on? Yeah. When did you go to grade school?
Your name is Narvel Roth.
Narvel Roth. Horticulturalist Narvel Roth tends to more than just plants on the grounds of Gracewood Gardens. With a meticulous hand and unwavering devotion, he's created an idyllic sanctuary for himself and his demanding employer, Mrs. Haverhill. But when her troubled great niece Maya arrives seeking apprenticeship, Narvel's peaceful, cultivated life begins to unravel.
Yeah, that's one way to put it for sure.
What we don't have in this summary is that Narvel is a reformed white supremacist.
Potentially.
Okay. Well, yeah, right. I mean, this is one of the questions.
I think this is the more interesting from that aspect of the three that we talk about. This one, because you don't really know, right? So Norval gets caught. He sells out his clan, essentially, and is living in, for lack of a better term, and is living in witness protection because of that. And so that witness protection, he's found a friendly who is also an antebellum South grand dame. I mean, and so like, who clearly sees things in stark black and white and wants to make America great again. I mean, and not to say I don't want to turn anybody off. There's no political overtones. No, I don't mean that. I was being facetious.
And there's no real overt racism either. And I mean, Sigourney Weaver plays Norma, right, or Mrs. Haverhill, whatever.
Right.
And I mean, there is she and Narvel have a conversation early on in the film where they're sitting on the porch, and just a couple lines of dialogue tell us exactly who this woman is. There's a dog on the porch, and aptly named Porch Dog. That is the dog's name, Porch Dog. And she says at one point, what is it? I knew that's all he'd ever be. That's why she named him. I named him Porch Dog early on because I knew that's all he'd ever be. That told me so much about her right there. This is, you know what? This is all you're going to be. And that's what I can tell right now. And this is how she talks about her great niece, her grandniece, whatever. is that, well, she's one, quote, of mixed blood, right? And again, tells us exactly, we know what that means, and we know how she feels about that just from that statement. But it's just these two quick things, and you're like, oh, okay, she's never going to come right out and say it, but we know exactly how this woman sees other people.
Oh, for sure. And how she sees Norval as well.
Yeah.
I mean, she knows who he is and where he came from. And that's the reason he has the position that he has. But everybody else on her staff is a person of color. And, it's meant to be that way. It's not even a question.
Except the butler.
That's true. Yeah. But I also feel like the butler is also a Norval character as well.
Yeah. Right. But he's also like the butler would be sort of like the face of things too. And I don't think that's unintentional on her part or that character's part.
Right. I I saw this with a group of people and that were not familiar with Bresson, or they were not familiar with Schrader either. And all of them, and they were all open to the discussion, but none of them really cared for the film. And I think it is, and I said something, and I even categorized it as like, this will probably be the douchiest thing I say all night long, but like, liking this movie is not the point of this movie.
Right.
I would even say that Schrader doesn't give a shit if you like this movie or not. It's about the conversation that it evokes, right? It's about you looking inward and seeing if you can find yourself in any of these characters, in these stark contrasts. And so, this movie progresses, and of course, I would say that it wears I think it kind of reveals itself pretty quickly. I mean, I could tell who Norval was. Even if you hadn't read about the movie, you could tell who Norval was. I mean, obviously from the porch dog and from the other things, but I knew who he was when I saw him in the haircut and how he's being presented, how he's presenting himself. And again, it's just a matter of like these extremes that no one that people clearly do go to, but you would hope that it's somewhat subdued. Do you find yourself in these roles, and do you find yourself thinking along these lines, and do you find yourself connecting in any sort of way with these characters? It's not about it's about the journey necessarily. It's not about the entire story per se. I don't know. Maybe I'm
no. But that brings up a question for me. So knowing who Norval is, but then watching him around, let's call them his employees. I mean, they're also more like trainees and apprentices than they are employees. The way that he talks to them, treats them, the way that he works with them in the garden. And again, like these are all also people of color. So what does that say about his being reformed, not being reformed? If he is there, and I mean, by all accounts, he treats them all with dignity.
But he also keeps... he also keeps himself as a distinct line between the front of the house and the back of the house. He also has all of them. It's also a subordinate role, right? And for no real good reason other than the nature of his being is that he's studied, right? And he's knowledgeable about horticulture. But I think that draws into question whether or not he truly is. I think it's one of those things of like assimilation allows you to maintain your civility, but also to maintain your bigotry at the same time. And you see Norval in where you don't see it in First Reformed and where you don't see it in the card counter is Norval goes back into his role relatively easily when he's dealing with the drug dealers that pop back up. Right. He bounces right back into his role. Now, I do think that, ultimately he is torn by it, and I think he wants to escape it. But I also think it's allowed him a level of comfort because he now has this role where he can hide out from the people who are, trying to find him. But he can also then still service and live this, life of privilege. That is, but he's still kind of kept underfoot as well. But it allows him to kind of skirt the line between the two worlds of redemption and still being able to have having the advantages of having a rich aristocracy kind of like woman who can look over him and provide him with housing and money and gifts and sex and what have you.
Yeah, it seems to be more like dinner and sex. And he doesn't necessarily seem thrilled about it all. And part of that is, I think, the way Schrader shows us sex as well. I mean, even in American Gigolo.
Right.
I mean, it was a pretty kind of like stilted, but I think intentionally, right? I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe this is also the guy that did, hardcore. So,
right.
But there's also, I think, maybe a metaphor of organization in this film too, that maybe I think you're touching on with Narvel and how he's like, everyone is in their place, right? And that's the character, not me. Don't but I mean, I joke, but I do want to be like careful about how that's framed, where I think that he also sees gardening, this kind of gardening where the estate that they're working on, this is a meticulously sort of planned out and organized and structured garden. It's not what he describes to us as like a natural garden where things just kind of grow and then you sort of, trim or sort of shape. This is a very kind of, man-made, sort of organized, man-controlled garden. And so maybe that also feeds in with this, like, this is fine as long as this is how things are. Things are meticulously placed. My life is organized. My hair is Brill creamed where it should be. Right.
Right. Every hair is in place. Yeah.
And yes, well, on Thursdays I go have dinner and sleep with the boss.
Right. And you see that even in the organization of the tools in the shed, and like, I mean, obviously he's living in a very sparse kind of one room housing unit.
It's very Spartan, like cottage.
But I mean, like when they're hanging the shovels, there's 4 shovels and they're all hung like equidistant apart at the same level.
Well, there are 48 different kinds of hose.
Right. I've only encountered like 35 in my life. I haven't caught them all.
That's just in Texas.
Right. I do find it interesting that Norval's life starts to unravel as soon as he breaks out of the garden, right? As soon as he leaves the grounds, he really can't relate. And I think that's, one of the, I think it's funny to me because I think Schrader, weirdly enough, kind of breaks out of that mold more in this movie than anything else that he's done as of late, with these flights of fancy and these like little telling bits of like, I don't know, just like ephemera or just kind of set pieces. But when he goes and meets with his parole officer and he's wearing a shirt that says, "We should all be feminists," in it. And you can just see like him not relating. I mean, it's obviously like a line to say, I don't know that guy, right? I mean, like, I know that I'm supposed to, and he helps me out because in certain things, but like, we don't connect or we do not relate whatsoever.
But he tries. Because remember, because his handler says, I'm retiring soon. And Norval goes, well, maybe we can, have coffee. And he's like, doesn't work that way. So, right. But this again shows us how Norval like doesn't really understand the outside world anymore. And I would say that he never did. If you're a white supremacist where you violently hate and harm people who don't look like you or ascribe to your same beliefs, then you don't understand how the world works anyway. Right? I mean, you really don't. If that's a trigger warning for anyone, fuck off. I'm sorry. But like you don't. And I think that now that he has found he's found a place that he is kind of at peace with in the garden. When he's outside of that, again, he's just like, I don't know how this works. Later on, when he falls back into this different pattern, you understand he knows how to move around and stay undetected. But again, like that's not the real world anyway.
Right. Is Maya the character? Okay. So when Maya comes in, I do think that this, when you obviously see this shift, right, that starts to open him up and just like allows him to, and it's what's, and it's, obviously I know it's part of the story, but where she's forced upon him and really Sigourney Weaver is, for lack of a better term, wanting to make her fall into line with a white lifestyle, that we can present her as being worthy of being at the house, right?
She wants to find a way for her to pass.
Right.
I mean, really, is that, yeah.
But Maya comes in and she's basically in this 70s pastiche of like, big round glasses and wearing tie-dye. And this, as Norval starts to see her as vulnerable and as human and says, and not as rigid as he's like, obviously Weaver mistakes what happens here. She mistakes who Norval is, because as he starts to talk with her, and again, I think obviously this is, like real life as well. As long as you start to humanize people, right? As soon as you start to connect, and he's teaching her these things that he knows that he probably had to learn after his white supremacist days were over. He starts to kind of connect with her and want to protect her as her life is still kind of falling apart and where, in the quote unquote real world outside of the garden. I do find all of what Schrader does there, and I know that it can lose people in the moment, but like what he does there when in their love scene and the whimsy that he has afterwards, where they're driving the car and the flowers are blooming. And that's really like, when you look at the garden of Gracewood, it's an ugly kind of very kind of harsh, but not a lot of color. Ugly is the wrong term, but it's very Shining-esque. It's very mechanical.
Well, it's also, I mean, I don't know. It's winter.
True.
I mean,
so most of it's dead.
This was filmed in Louisiana. I'm not sure where exactly it's set. I mean, we never really
it's hard to say
here, but I know it was filmed in Louisiana. So, and they're getting ready for the spring kind of fundraiser, and the big attraction is the garden. So I'm assuming that it's going to sort of come back up, right?
Bloom,
that it's going to sort of bloom. But I mean, I think that's interesting too, because we're in this kind of garden that is in a stasis, is not really, it's in hibernation, right? And yet we're watching something else grow. Right. I don't know. Am I taking too much stretch there? But I mean, I think, so I don't think that's an accident where we're like, this is dead, or this is sort of in its sort of, regeneration phase, but this is starting to sort of blossom and grow and change. Right. I do think that sort of post-sex whimsy scene is something that Schrader did in First Reformed. Right. I mean, that was supposed to be more of a platonic, connection. But again, that same kind of, we're floating through the solar system over Earth, right? And I mean, that's exactly what I thought of, right? Going back there, those parallels, because he didn't do that in Card Counter. I mean, we see
it a little bit when they like walk through the lights.
That's
true. After, they kind of walk through the grounds together after they've had sex, And so there's a little bit of that kind of levity there.
But it's also more of like a grounded moment. I mean, because we know that like as they're driving down the highway and the grass starts to just, become luminescent. We know that's not really
what's
really happening, right? That it's a clear metaphor. And the same thing in First Reformed.
There's a train going into a
tunnel somewhere.
It's like there's a rocket ship launching. Right?
Fireworks are going off. Oh wait, I think that's a metaphor for something. Semiotics are cool. But I mean, I do like that callback. Where do I want to go with this? Because I don't. Well, can we just talk about the sex scene?
Yeah.
For me? So this was, they go on the run, right? So Maya has a kind of ex-boyfriend, current sort of drug dealer. There's a fight. She gets beat up. And eventually, what happens? When does Norma kick them out?
That's after all of that, because then Norma sees.
It's before. So it's she gets beat up.
They hadn't had sex yet.
Right.
Okay, so
she assumes they are, but they're not.
Right. Maya gets beat up.
He lets her stay.
Norval goes to confront the boyfriend and his friend. Basically, but they don't fight at that point.
No, he asked the cop to go check. He asked the cop to go talk to him.
Right, but remember when the guy calls him Proud Boy?
But that's when they're leaving.
I thought that was
okay. So she gets beat up. Narvel goes to his handler and is like, "Hey, can you go talk to this guy and tell him not to mess with this girl?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." Narvel lets Maya stay instead of going back home. Norma, Sigourney Weaver, doesn't want that to happen. She's like, no, we all have to make our own way. We all have to like figure things out, blah, blah. Narvel's like, whatever. She's going to stay. So she stays. And at one point, he goes to check on her and she makes a pass at him. Maya makes a pass at Narvel. Narvel, kind of backs up. And
basically because he's got Nazi tattoos and he didn't want her to take his shirt off.
Right. But anyway,
that's what kind of brings him out of it.
Yeah, but he leaves her cabin, and that's when Norma sees that. And the next night they're all having dinner, and she has too much to drink and like yells at both of them and tells them that they're both fired and get the fuck out.
Right.
That's when they hop in his truck and go back to her place to get stuff for her. And that's when he confronts the two drug dealers. And then later on, they go and tear up the garden. Then he goes and beats them up.
Okay. At one point, but at one point he confronts them outside of their apartment.
Right. That's when she's in her apartment packing a bag.
Right, but so this is, we probably should have read up with that because it's been a minute since I saw it. But yes, but she's up in her apartment and also she's doing drugs at that point.
Correct.
And so, but then there's a house party where he goes and tortures them.
Right. That's after
the garden gets terrible.
Because he goes back, like he gets a call and he goes back to the garden. He knows or finds out who did it. But
Maya's there when he tortures those guys too, right?
Right, because she sets them up.
Right.
So he's like, look, you need to call them, find out where they are. And she's like, yeah, they said I could just come by whenever. But like, all's forgiven, cool, right? If I just want to buy more drugs or whatever. And she's, a pretty young woman. And
right.
So
they're drug dealers.
Yeah. And then, right. And that's when they go to that house party. And he basically breaks their legs with like a ball peen hammer, right? Because she makes a comment about how she wants to kill them, and so he's like, he gives her a gun and says, "Okay, go ahead, kill them." And she's like, can't do it." And he's like, "That's fine,"
right?
Which I think was probably the idea anyway. Well, I hope, right, to be like, you don't want to go down this path, but he also tells those guys like, you need to remember me, and so he breaks her leg.
Right, and Norval gives Maya an out early on too. After she gets beat up, she's staying at his place, and he takes his shirt off as he's as he's journaling.
Well, this is when they're on the run,
right?
And this was so weird. So here, I want to go back to this shirtless journaling thing, but they. He's like, look, we got to go kind of on the run. We got to move around. But they never go too far because he's able to meet back up with his handler or new handler, within like an hour or two. So they don't go very far. But they're in like 4 different motels. And so I'm like, how far away are they going? Like, where are they on the run? It's a weird sort of like, radius that they stay in. But yeah, he comes at a certain point and he's like, she needs to know kind of who I am. And so he sits down, takes his shirt off, props the mirror up, right, in a way over the desk in the hotel room, over a way that he can see her and she can see more of him. Yeah, it was weird.
But I think that's part of it, right? All of that's supposed to be unsettling. The sex scene, which we haven't really talked about, but like, they both get naked in front of one another. And, he's got his white supremacist tattoos, and then he kneels down in front of her.
Right.
And basically, in submission to her and basically saying,
whatever you want.
Right, whatever you want. And also, this is not who this is never who I would have been. This is who I am now. Like, right. I am not I'm no longer under the thumb of Sigourney Weaver, I'm not trying to, he's basically saying, I am yours. I mean,
right.
For all yeah.
Right. And then that's when she's like, you will remove those tattoos. He's like, yeah.
Right.
I mean, are these like, is there a reason he didn't get rid of the tattoos before? I mean, are these reminders of who he doesn't want to be? Are these reminders of who he was? Are these reminders of who he still is? I mean, I don't know. That's a curious question. Or is he like, it's too much money and it hurts? I don't know. Right. I mean, because they're like huge. I don't know.
So where do you think it fits in the 3, or in general in regards to Schrader's filmography?
I think it's good. I really like it. I think it's better than the card counter.
Yeah, I do too.
Not as good as First Reformed. I think First Reformed is. I think it's his best film.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I think we've said that.
I think we've said that too.
But I do think that First Reformed is his masterpiece.
Yeah.
I think it's what I wonder. These films are so inaccessible and they're so small. Like I wonder, looking back, if he. Oh, and I think we said this when we were doing Schrader too. I wonder if he's going to get the recognition that he deserves. Because honestly, these three films, and again, I know I didn't care for the card counter as much as I like these other two, but I still think it's an interesting movie. I think the three actors that he's gotten to play these roles are really spot on and great.
Yeah.
I don't always agree with the secondary cast, but in this case, I think that's probably what Master Gardener has
over the card counter.
Well, especially over the card counter.
Yeah.
But even First Reformed, I don't think every single role works perfectly. I don't think Cedric the Entertainer works all that great, and I know that I may sound a little.
That was the one I was gonna.
Right. I mean, I just don't think that they're like. I don't think Cedric and Tiffany can carry the gravitas of these roles. I think someone like Sigourney. I think there's other people that could have done that better, and I think maybe it's a budgetary reason, or I don't know. I'm not gonna I don't say they were bad. I'm just saying that they kind of stood out.
I think they were being asked to do really new and different things from what they've done in the past. And so I think
they're both comedians too,
right.
So
so I think part of it is on us as well, and I mean the viewer, not you and I, right? But where we're like, oh wait, she's supposed to be funny, she's not funny. That's weird. I think very much in the same way, maybe as people first. Well, Jim Carrey's not the best, I think, analog for this, but because when you see him in Eternal Sunshine, you're like, okay, wow, that's something different, but. You expect a certain thing, for better or worse, when you see certain actors and actresses, playing roles. And I think same thing with Cedric the Entertainer. I mean, and these are both very big personalities too, and to see them really kind of rein themselves in, that's got to be something really difficult and different from what they've ever done in the past. So
for sure. I just wonder again, is he going to in the pantheon of great American directors, especially people who are doing really their best work right now, is he going to be recognized? It's interesting to me that this movie is being made and the two movies that we're going to talk about today, I find it very refreshing that in the age of bullshit that's being put out for streaming, that we do seem to have a very healthy independent film scene right now. And again, I don't have any idea how much Master Gardener cost or how much any of these other films that we've kind of talked about, but when we talk about this movie or Beau is Afraid, or there are these even The Lighthouse, there are these small distribution houses that seem to be fronting these movies. And I'm here for it. I'm really glad that we are absolutely getting these films, even though they may not be making, I don't know. You didn't sit down and fund Master Gardener thinking that Master Gardener was going to give you 10 times your investment, right? I mean, it was at the theaters for a millisecond, and then it was immediately on video on demand. I'm hoping that people go out and watch it. I'm hoping that people recognize all three of these movies, and I look forward to the day that I really would love to see Schrader's films get the Criterion treatment or some sort of niche, distribution house treatment before he passes away, where he can go and do commentaries and kind of give us his insight. And it's probably not what he's interested in at this point, but you contrast it with someone like Scorsese, who's getting hundreds of millions of dollars to do films, and look, I'm glad for it, but hundreds of millions of dollars to do films at the end of his career. Someone like Schrader, who's working on a micro budget and still being able to tell these ridiculously powerful stories, getting amazing performances out of Edgerton Hawk and Isaac. Not that those people aren't good actors anyway, but I mean, really being able to pick the people who really fit his pieces well. I don't know. I mean, it's great. I hope. I don't know if this is Schrader's last film. I think it's a great one to go out on. I mean, and I like I said, I do think First Reformed is his masterpiece. But I am really, really happy that he's able to make these types of movies, at this stage in his career.
Yeah, I was really curious about is he going to get his due? Because I don't think he gets his due now.
No, I don't think so either.
I think there's a small cadre of people who acknowledge his greatness and acknowledge, even just these last 3 films, right? These last 3 films are better than so many other people's complete body of work.
Right.
Right. And and not enough people sort of talk about these things. But yeah, so I hope he gets a bigger kind of treatment, a bigger, Criterion or boutique kind of, release, so I can sort of collect them all and sleep with them beneath my pillow.
Right.
I did have, and this is not, I did have a question about, I become more and more curious about the women in Schrader's films.
Mm-hmm.
And, they are often, and I want to make sure that I'm not accusing Schrader of misogyny or sort of sexism, but I think they're used often as saviors, right?
Sure.
As redemption vehicles. And I know that we saw this to an extent in Pickpocket. But I just wonder if sometimes this is a misstep on Schrader's part. Are these characters fully formed? Are they real characters? Or are they just kind of cardboard there meant to serve the man to sort of go about his redemption arc and sort of be saved? Because I don't know. I mean, these women aren't saying, "Hey, let me change you. Let me fix you."
Right. I think it's a good question. I don't necessarily know the answer, obviously, off the top of my head. I mean, looking at Amanda Seyfried and Tiffany Haddish, and I don't know the actress's name who played Maya.
I forget her name. Did you know that he wanted Zendaya to do?
That makes sense.
Yeah, originally, but
I don't think physicality.
Contessa Swindle.
Okay, she was great.
She was fantastic. Yeah.
I don't think Zendaya's physicality would have worked with Edgerton. I think she would have been I think Maya's. I don't know the way that she carried herself. I don't think you get Zendaya to do the nude scene, and I think the nude scene is important. And I also think the nude scene this is going to sound terrible, but from a Zendaya standpoint of her being so slight, I think you need someone a little bit more powerful. Yeah. And not to say that Zendaya's not. I mean, what I'm saying. I'm trying to.
You need more of a physical presence on film,
right? Yeah. And to contrast these stark Nazi tattoos that are, so you need someone who has a little,
you're trying to talk your way out.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to remove my legs with my face. I will say that and coming from, obviously, coming from a male perspective, I think all these women have agency. I don't think that he writes down to them, but I do think that it's an overarching theme in Schrader's, in Schrader's filmography of saying these men who have misplaced themselves in society, reach out to these women as sort of anchors, and whether or not it's the right. And I think you see that with Norval is that he's done it in 2 different ways, and one is a weight, right? It's an albatross, and one is truly a buoy. I don't know. I think that you contrast this with Betsy in Taxi Driver, where obviously that's his story, but not his movie. I think, again, we talked about this before, but I think that I don't know if Schrader lets his women characters succumb to that kind of if you look at Maya specifically, she's the domineering one, and it's going to, and it's really an interesting story then of whether or not Norval has ever been his own man, has ever really been able to to step out of needing a handler, and whereas Ethan Hawke and Oscar Isaacs clearly didn't really need that. He seemed like he was always kind of just a damaged human being throughout the summer. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting question to ask. I don't know if Schrader's necessarily capable of flipping this script and this story. I think he's, like we've said, he's told this story over and over and over again. I think this is his story. But yeah, no, it's an interesting point.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, you know, this is something that he saw admittedly, that he saw in Pickpocket.
Right.
And keeps using it. I mean, and you see it in Light Sleeper as well. But, and again, you're right. All of the female characters have agency. And in this film, we see a clear change in both Narvel and in Maya in who is in charge, right? It starts off that Narvel's in charge and helps her get clean and helps her kick. But then as soon as she sees the tattoos, she's on top, right? The hierarchy has completely changed, and she is the one calling the shots. And I think that's really interesting as well. I mean, I think that as human beings, we look for connection, and we look for connection to help us change something we don't always like about ourselves, right? And I think that's a lot of what's going on here. I think it's telling that in a film like The Card Counter, what Oscar Isaac's character tries to do with the younger character, the younger male character, doesn't work.
Right.
Right. But what happens between himself and Haddish does. And so I think that's an interesting kind of complexity there as well. That these male relationships maybe don't always function the way they should, but
well, and you see that in Blue Collar too, right? I mean, these male. I mean, like it ends in a fist, in fisticuffs, right? Literally ends in fisticuffs of men who should have been there to support each other the entire time, have only been sent to backstab each other and become unreliable at the end of the day.
Yeah.
This is someone that we should be, as an American filmmaker, we should be lifting up.
Oh yeah.
Is it because we have so much shit right now? Is it because we have
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think he's ever gotten his due and attention. I mean, I think even when First Reform was almost like a Paul Schrader renaissance, right? And even then, people weren't saying, wait, we forgot what an auteur this guy is and how amazing he is, right? It was almost, people were like almost surprised and shocked that he could do this. And
to be fair, he was coming off a pretty low point in his career.
Sure. But here's and I don't want to compare him again to Scorsese, but we're acting like every film Scorsese made was Goodfellas.
Right, sure.
And it's not.
Right.
I mean, look, I enjoy Shutter Island. But I mean, it's not Raging Bull, and so.
But everyone is $100 million. But no, and I mean, you're right. I mean, Gangs of New York is not. They're small. They're dips, right?
Right.
I think a lot of people are apologists, and myself included. I'm going to throw myself on that pyre. It's just look, but you're right, and given the fact that every single movie he comes to the table with is a 9-digit budget, right. Like it's not hard to at least grab some attention there. And I would say he's never gone, to the Canyons level of filmmaking,
but
right?
Here's the thing, this is something I admire about Schrader, is that he will do that.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
He will try to make a film like that. Okay, it didn't work. Not at all. But this is a guy who will continually go and try these things and try to do something a little different. He doesn't play it safe. I mean, I think he's aware that any kind of misstep, and he's back in sort of like director limbo.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. And to that end, I would say that Schrader's films are better than Scorsese's films. I mean, especially these last three. I mean, there's Scorsese has a very specific problem of heroizing demons, and he can't get beyond that. So it's I don't know. Not to say we have to tear someone down to bring someone else.
No, I wasn't trying. I was only trying to sort of compare peaks and valleys and dips in a way. But look, I mean, I think this is how. I don't know. This is how art and culture works, right? We have our favorites. We have sort of anointed ones, right? But I don't think Schrader's ever gotten his due. And I just think that these are films that, while they're not experimental, super art house, they're well enough off, I think, the beaten path where people are sort of like, it's about a gardener. Why would I go see that, right? Or the people you went and saw it with who are kind of like, what the fuck what did I just watch? This doesn't feel like a difficult film to me. And I'm not trying to sort of like big up my intellectual capabilities, but
No. I mean, like the people that I went with one's a literal doctor and one's like again, they're all intelligent people. They just are not,
as opposed to like a metaphysical doctor or a metaphorical doctor.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, they're not a chiropractor. I get that. It's fine. No, I guess I to that point, I do think that these require a little bit more. I don't know where you draw that line. I will say this. Let me just say it like this.
Yeah.
It's not. These are not casual viewer movies.
Right.
This is not something you can come into. I mean, like, look, a casual viewer can clearly come in and watch The Master Gardener and get everything out that we got out of it, or whatever it is that we're bringing to the table, all this existential nonsense that we bring to the table, like right, it's
introspection and yes, and right. Existential nonsense. But no, this is true.
But I will say that this is not that it does. I will say I enjoyed this more knowing Schrader's history, knowing Bresson. I mean, knowing where this was all going. Like, I liked this from the opening crawl, right?
Oh, so did I.
This is a movie that I knew I was going to like, and so I went in like knowing all the beats. I knew all the beats. I knew everything that was going to happen here. Not specifically, but I knew.
Right.
I've heard this song before, right? So I knew when all this came about.
But this is the same thing people say about Marvel and superhero films. They're like, well, you didn't like it because you don't know all the backstory about this character and this character and from this comic book number 35, but the one that was done in 19. It's the same. It's the same thing.
Okay, so let's dig into that then. Is it really the same thing though?
What I mean is like, so what you just said was I enjoyed this more because I knew the history, because I knew Bresson, because I knew because you had seen those other two films.
I don't know if I enjoyed this more because of that. I think that I was able to get over the hurdle of this film.
Okay.
That I think that a casual viewer might come into that because again, the starkness of the stillness of the camera, the starkness of the set pieces, the very muted emotion of the acting. I knew all that going in. Like that doesn't necessarily mean when I watched the first Reformed. I was familiar, right? But I mean, right. I hesitate to say that I needed 35 Bresson films
no. That's
before I understood these films and I could enjoy them, right?
That's not what I meant. I guess I meant that I see parallels in how people talk about like superhero movies that we all just kind of are like, I can just sit down and watch that. Or I assume.
Let me table it this way. If Schrader is making this 3 films, if his next 3 films are just a different, is significantly the same or similar to, all right, now I've got another white guy who is tortured in this way rather than this way. Diminishing returns 100%. I don't think he can continue to tell this story over and over and over again like he has the past, because he's done it well enough with the past 3 films to switch it up. And I don't know how many more of these he has in him. I don't know how many more of these I have in me to say, like, I mean, like, go back to the well for affliction. Go and tell me a story.
Right.
Like, I'm good with the tortured man. Okay. Because I relate.
No, right.
I understand that story. But I mean, I think he sees himself as in the latter parts of his career. So if he wants to tell this story again a couple more times, I'll indulge it. I mean, as pompous as bullshit that sounds, I'll let him do. I'll allow it. But I will say that he's that if this is a trilogy that he's wrapping up in a kind of an unofficial trilogy type sense, I'm all for it. I don't necessarily know if I need to see another 3 more of these. And I think that's the real rub on the Marvel, right? Is that we've seen 25 of these now. And yes, now every single one of them requires me to have a backstory. And it's not just about me understanding Bresson. It's about me understanding 60 years of comic history to get all the Easter eggs. Or I have to watch I have to watch something on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
It's like I have a problem with Richard Kelly's Southland Tales. Like that movie is bullshit. And again, I appreciate the audacity of it all, but I think time has put Richard Kelly in his place. Speaking of filmmakers that like Kevin Smith, where I thought when their first film came out, I thought they were going to be the next coming. Like for me to have to go and read a graphic novel and then also piece together a comic book series, something else on the side, or go and dig in deeply into the mythos of some website, or look, there are times where I will do that, but your fucking movie better be legit before I'm going to go in and really dig into your mythology. And Southland Tales doesn't do that. I mean, it just kind of lies flat. So I get your point. I don't know. Like I said, and if the next movie is,
I mean,
an enigmatic window washer, I'm just gonna be like, oh, all right, okay, maybe I don't need to see this one when it first comes.
I like that.
That's just the guy just like looking down all the time,
or just a bank teller. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of like boring jobs of people. All right, you want anything else you want to say about Mr. Schrader or the gardener?
No, and I think we said it all.
Okay. Yes, we are the definitive last word. All right, then let's move on and talk about Enys Men.
Are you lonely?
Not really.
You there? Can you hear me? Hello? Is there anybody there? Hello? Hello? Who's there? Can you hear me?
Here's a real quick
storyline. No, let's
right?
because I'm really interested in hearing the synopsis for this one.
So, set in 1973 on an uninhabited island off the Cornish coast, a wildlife volunteer's daily observations of a rare flower turn into a metaphysical journey that forces her, as well as the viewer, to question what is real and what is nightmare. The only feature that suggests a continuous, even though highly speeded up, flow of time is the appearance of a fruticose lichen growing on the flowers over 3 days and simultaneously on the protagonist's body. Look, this film, it shot on 16 millimeter. This is a grainy, gorgeous film that you just kind of have to give yourself over to, right? There's a lot more style than there is story. And it's more, I would say it's more kind of art piece than it is narrative, right? And the sound is all post-synced, which adds another kind of like harrowing layer that's just, again, that kind of disassociative kind of effect, I think, to the film. So, I don't know. This feels like this feels like a movie that is about transformation, about the liminal space between time, or maybe the space where boundaries start to blur, where the past bleeds into the present, which bleeds into the future, where no changes, which she writes in her journal, right, observing the flowers, where no changes is a known lie we trick ourselves into believing because everything is always changing.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of movies that I'm surprised are being made, right? That someone's. I mean, of course, it probably didn't cost a shit ton of money to film this on 16 millimeter and put it together and push.
You know,
it
it was
out.
like carbon neutral, or they tried to make it carbon neutral.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry,
I can see that. I mean, like he's from the area, right? I mean, it's just so
he's a Cornish filmmaker. He's from Cornwall.
It is. Yeah, I mean, like what you bring to this. I think this is a film that is begged to be seen over and over again. I think you could even come into this and watch it piecemeal. You don't need to hell, you could watch this in reverse. You could watch it in 30-minute increments, just chopped up. It's mostly without dialogue. The dialogue that you do hear is pretty much inscrutable. Like you can't make half of it out. It's over like an old radio coming across a CB broadcast, or being sung, or a sermon that's kind of been given in bits and pieces. It's I while watching it, and I can see this is like looking at movies that like had I gone to see this with three other people again, they would have. I don't know.
Would they have walked out?
I don't think they would have walked out, but I do think that this is not a movie for the casual viewer who wants a definitive A to B plot line.
Right.
But this is a movie that, like you said, if you give yourself over to it, I think you'll get something out of it every single time differently. I found myself in the first 30 minutes trying to like piece it all together. And then at some point you just kind of let yourself go with it. But like, it's one of those films that like, it also has so many like little things that just happen. Like obviously 7 and 3 being set in 73, that 7 pops up a bunch, right? There's 7 flowers. The flowers have 7 petals. There's 7 skulls buried under the angle rock. There's 7 miners. There's 7 maids. Her coffee is 7 maids' coffee. So it's repeated over and over again.
And repetition itself is a theme in the film.
Right. And then time like loops back on itself. So like you're on an island where 7 people, you think 7 people will have died on a boat trying to get out to another supply boat. You see that played out where this woman who is on this island, like you said, to think that you're doing this horticultural research or whatever, and she's being brought supplies. Her only, she has a routine that's, she goes out and she checks the temperature of the soil, and she looks at the flowers, and the flowers start responding to her. But she does the same thing over and over again. She gets up from there and she drops a rock into a well. And if none of this makes sense, yeah, that's part of the point. None of it really makes sense. Like, but you get like little hints. Like she finds the boat, the back part of the boat that crashed. She finds it wedged in the rocks and she pulls it out. And then what you think is what I thought was her daughter, when she puts it up on the mantelpiece and says oven, which was a Coventry or whatever the boat was. I can't remember now exactly the name. She's like, oh, that says oven, and again, there's nothing else to it. She tells her daughter self to get down off of a larger kind of an awning.
It's almost like a greenhouse, though, right? Because it's like a glass. Yeah.
And you see bits and pieces of like the house that she lives in is in different states of disrepair throughout. It's got different types of, and so at a certain point, as she starts to notice the lichen on the flowers, she lifts up her shirt and she's got a scar across her belly, and lichens start to grow on herself as well. I don't know how to this is either a movie you're gonna fucking love or you're gonna fucking hate. I cannot see any sort of like, oh, okay, I got it and I'm done with it, kind of bullshit. Like I think this is gonna be a very much a divisive kind of experience for people. But if you allow yourself to kind of get caught up in the weird monotony of it all, and I think that's obviously the point, right? I mean, I think the point is that this, like you said, this chronicling of no change until change happens, and then this woman who has always been on this island or has never been on this island, and like what I get out of this is that she's forced. This seems some sort of like she's forced to relive these moments because moments don't exist in time. They are always happening and not happening. She's always been on the island as a young self. And so it's just a matter of like when things start to change and she burns her hand, it's like it's almost because she's afraid of the things that are changing, right? And she wants to go back to the monotony, right? And it's so bizarre, but like so comforting at the same time. And like it's okay. So here's the thing too. Like, why do you think this gets categorized as horror?
Okay, I was gonna ask you that too because I guess because it's kind of a
Unsettling?
head trip. It's unsettling. It is haunting. I think you're always waiting for something else to happen, right? Or waiting for some kind of, oh, what's going to come out of this well next time she drops the rock down there?
Right.
What's up with that big rock in the middle that's always like framed in the center of the frame? Like, oh, wait, is this a ghost story? What's up with this preacher? I mean, there's always something there, but I don't know why it's categorized as horror because it's not. I mean, it's alluring. It drew me in because it is so kind of, you know, it's like an Aqualung song, right? It's strange and beautiful. Right? I mean, like it's but it did. It sort of pulled me in and had that kind of trance effect. But I was never, I don't know, I wasn't unsettled in a way where I was curled up on my couch like, oh my, what's gonna happen? I was unsettled in a way because of how sort of fascinated I was with this.
And this is not even like something like Skinamarink, which is a similar tone, I guess, but doesn't pull it off nearly as effectively. But like Skinamarink clearly wants to be scary, right? Its intention is
it wants to be scary in what it's not showing you,
right? And the scenes that I guess could be classified as horror, you know, where the scene where she gets pulled back to the house and her face gets blurry for a moment. And there's a scene where, you know, where she realizes that herself / daughter is going to fall off the thing and slash her stomach. And so she's like screaming silently. And then maybe the death of her lover who brings her,
supplies the boatman.
Right, the boatman, yeah. And I guess like you said, just the general unease of it all. But yeah, I think any sort of classification of this movie does it a disservice and also puts you into a mindset to think, oh, well, I was expecting this to be scary or expecting this to be this. Like the meticulous nature that he had to put together to have the color bleeds and the sound being synced up and like, and the craftsmanship that went into this for a second movie and I know we say this a lot, or at least I do say this a lot of like the kind of like confidence and the audacity to put this movie out as your second fucking movie. Good for you, dude. That's impressive.
Yeah. So he shoots everything on 16 millimeter. And I think he uses, at least on his first film, he used a Bolex camera, which is an older, Swiss made. I think he used the same one, but so he shoots on 60 millimeter film and then and if I'm wrong, someone correct me, but I believe he processes the film himself. And so a lot of the color bleeds are accidental as well.
Right.
Just like shooting that kind of film stock and then like hand processing it, that's gonna happen. And some of the scratches on the negative and stuff too. But I also think he pushed it, shot it like a different ISO and then developed it a little bit different to get those color pops because the reds and stuff just explode off the screen. It's so cool.
This would have been so easy to film digitally and then do a post-production on this, right? Yeah. I mean, like, because and you would have to imagine the close-up scenes that he had, and I would imagine 16 millimeter probably led to the length of the shots. But there are a lot of like up close, like when she's walking up the hill and like the boot shots and like just there's a lot of like just really pretty still pieces.
The close-ups
there.
of the flowers.
Yeah. And
some of the water shots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And running those backwards, right? I mean, so like all of that, like that kind of ethereal, just this, like I said, this kind of like catching you off guard with what you're watching. I was really, really impressed. I mean, like I was worried because I knew what this was, right? I knew what it was, and I knew we just watched Skinamarink, and I was like, I don't know, man. Like, but like for 96 minutes, I am there the entire time, and I never felt bored. And again, I get it. If this is not your thing, I would never argue someone that say that, oh, you should like this movie. But if you can get past I just think it's like, I think it's so like, it's interesting in a way that you don't see many films be interesting right now. And I compare it to like, obviously it gets compared a lot to like 70s British folk horror, but I look at this like Lars von Trier and like a lot of what he's doing right now, like an Antichrist, and of course it's not as shocking or as violent as that movie, but this kind of just like I don't know, theater of the weird that's just like, but like compelling though as well. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so speaking of the British 70s horror stuff, the director, Mark Jenkin, did an interview with Deeper Into Movies, which I think is like a offshoot of Vice, where he talked about like 23 different movies that were sort of influences. And so no surprise that you have people like Alan Lomax and Nicholas Roeg,
right,
and those guys. And especially like with her red coat,
yeah.
You think of Don't Look Now. But he was, I mean, influenced by all these things. But again, like, yeah, it's not The Wicker Man.
No.
Right? I
no.
mean, it's not that. And so it's
even as ethereal as and kind of vague plotted as those movies are, this is something, it's a completely different animal.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anybody would have, I mean, like, I don't think this is, it's surprising to me that this gets made. I mean, it really is. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it gets made off the back of the success that Bait had.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Jenkins' first film was called Bait. It was done in 2019. It has much more of a narrative. It's set in kind of modern day Cornwall and deals with sort of tradition of the fishermen, right, in that community, but also dealing with gentrification. Similar style. Right. I mean, again, but shot in black and white, but still that post-synced audio. But that was heralded as a masterpiece. And so I think that being out and getting so much attention and so much critical praise, somebody, and this was done through Neon or distributed through Neon, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sure Neon was like, yeah, go for it.
Sure,
here,
right.
Here, right. Yes. Because, I mean, I think at least probably in the UK, people are going to pay a lot of attention or paid a lot of attention to this. Even if, we're kind of like, I don't know, troglodytes and Philistines here. So
sure.
No, I don't.
Just munching popcorn and like,
where's Thor?
Movie don't make sense. Want money back.
When Spider-Man showed up in this one, I don't mean to.
Boobs were cool, but outside that, no like.
Boobs.
So
no, I think that's kind of.
I did think the clues that he throws you. I think the survivalist novel that was that she's reading, and this. So contrast what I just said about not wanting to go and dig in to to a long backstory or a lot of whatever nonsense to get a shitty film. This one, like going in and looking at like the what's it called, it was something of a survival, right? It was, I forget now exactly. I looked it up now, I can't remember now. But the book that she's reading is just basically about how society is not sustainable at this point, at this level, and this in this largesse, and like you've got to come back to a smaller portion, and then I don't know, there's all of those types of like little bits and pieces, and like I just thought that was really, really interesting.
Well, I think this film is just so wide open to interpretation, right? I mean, again, like we talked about change and stasis and how like the monotony of repetition can become so overwhelming, right, that you don't notice the change until like change is upon you. Which, I mean, look, you want to compare that to climate change?
Right.
I mean, right. And how that matches up with the survival book. I mean, there's another sort of reading of it. I think.
Well, the miners too, and and you clearly think that something happened, and because they're all like when they come out on the mountain, they're all wearing dynamite.
Right.
You look at the oppressive nature of religion as they're all like stomping back and forth. The seven maids are stomping back and forth as she's lying down on the ground. Yeah, I mean, there's like you said, whatever you take away from this movie is probably right.
Yeah.
And there's so much to take away from it.
Yeah, and like the destruction of sort of like traditional jobs, traditional values. And I think Cornwall's an interesting place to have this stuff set in. Anyway, I was really curious, like watching this, like, okay, if I knew more about the culture of Cornwall, right? Because the Cornish is its own language, right? So very much like, Welsh, right? I mean, it has its own language. But if I knew more of the culture and sort of legends of Cornwall, would this film open up another reading, right? Another kind of interpretation. What was his name? Adam Scoville, writing for BBC Culture, said the film was a perfect anti-romantic expression of Cornish eeriness. And I'm like, not knowing anything about like Cornwall, I'm like,
Right.
That sounds really interesting. And how someone familiar with this place would look at this film too. I mean, I know there's a lot of legends with like giants and ghosts and other monsters that live in Cornwall, and it's also connected to the Arthurian legend. So there's all of this stuff that's right there too. Also, this idea, kind of going back to I think the climate change too. There's this idea of man's anxiety or attempt to control and organize nature. This connects with Master Gardener as well, and how you just can't, because nature does not fucking care, right? Nature is beautiful and haunting and will fuck you up. And I think that's part of this film as well, right? This attention to the land, this attention to documenting the land and how you just can't.
Right.
I also think that this is a film where, go back to Bresson. Bresson was a filmmaker who cared more about the feeling than the meaning.
Right.
Right. And I think this is another film like that too, where, the vibe is much more important than the kind
for
of.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. One thing going back to Master Gardener real quick, the one point I wanted to bring up, which I thought was pretty funny, is that Edgerton at one point, like as he's kind of getting out of his handler phase, he's like, journaling was good up until a point, and now I kind of lost the thread of it. I was just like, oh, that's fucking brilliant.
This
like,
journal used to serve me, but this is my last. Like now it's become like oppressive. But I'm like, that was funny.
I do think that maybe that's a little bit of Schrader with kind of like nodding to us, saying, look, this is what you got. I mean, this is my last Bresson. Like, I mean, like true, like my last homage to Bresson is like, we're gonna put away all of this because I'm kind of running out of it as well.
Well, and I think. I mean, I think we talked about this before too. When this film was first shown, and I think it was Venice, maybe it was Berlin, I'm not sure. It opens up with him writing in the journal, and people in the audience laughed.
Right.
And it's like, I didn't think it was funny. I mean, I guess I expected it, but I also thought that this character, where it made perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Because he is keeping track of like growth, in seasons and seeds and what you're planting and what you're watering
and he's someone who is kind of really switching from a different lifestyle and trying to be something else. And I think this is a kind of exercise, a kind of cathartic exercise. And you see his desk in his room, and everything has its own place. This makes sense. It didn't really make sense to me in the card counter. I mean, I guess you could make a similar argument, but it just didn't seem to fit.
The controlled nature of card counting seems like that would cover your basis for journaling, right? I mean, clearly it's symbolic of men who have chaos in their lives trying to come back to find some. The card counter to me is it's interesting because the way that he handled his entire hotel room, right? Like he wrapped everything in sheets to be, this idea of cleanliness and like, kind of antiseptic, just kind of lifestyle of like nothing else exists except for what I do. I can kind of, but I agree with you that, the journalistic pieces of it, and especially him like keeping a record of his thoughts when he would have been one so reviled and like publicly reviled, right? Like Hawke and Edgerton would have been as well, but not quite as, I don't know, it wouldn't have been like as scandalous. You would have captured the white supremacists, whatever, cell, and then you would have never heard about that guy ever again because he would have turned state's evidence and then he would have just disappeared, right? I mean, you would have just heard of everyone else.
Yeah.
As we go down the rabbit hole of
of men who journal. But I mean, I think it's been an interesting device in Schrader's career, and I think sometimes it works better than it does others.
Right.
Like I still don't think it fucking works in Taxi Driver. I know that.
No.
That's not to pick nits with that film because it's a brilliant film, but I'm just like, this guy's not. He has no introspection. He's not
right. You'd almost argue that does he even know how to write? I mean, to that extent,
yeah.
right? I mean, Travis Bickle is not an intellectual. He desires to be, but even journalistically, he would have tired of it. There's no way he would have kept it up.
Right.
And so like maybe I can see it from a perspective of like cataloging your fares, but even then, like he has no passion behind the driving of the taxi, right? I mean, like his life until he starts to like turn is full of laziness and apathy and television watching and pornography.
Right.
I mean, that's what he fills his days with, and he has no sense of culture or correction. He sees everything so stark and black and white that he thinks he's right.
Right.
Which is the real danger of that of him, right? I mean, that's why he's so antithetical to like the characters that he's doing now. I mean,
I can never decide if it works in Light Sleeper or not.
Yeah.
I mean, there's sometimes I think it does, and other times I think it doesn't.
You know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of Schrader being a pawn to big fucking empty note
journaling.
Big journal.
Big journal.
Look, Schrader, we get it. Needs paying your fucking bills, man. But it ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
I found us out.
No one uses like an old school like marble composition notebook either. All right. What else do you want to say about anything else that you want to say about Enys Men?
No, I say give it a shot.
Yeah.
I mean, like I would look. You'll know pretty quickly whether you're into it or not. It's not something like if you don't like it in the first 20. I would say if you give it 30 minutes, and then because at 30-minute point it does start to like dive into a little bit more of like, okay, now we've seen the repetition and starts to see like. Because 30 minutes is right where she starts to find the back of the ship, and then you're given more, right? You're never given everything fully, but the flowers things start to moving a little bit.
Yeah. But again, it's one of those films where just give yourself over to it. It's I don't know. You can make it a puzzle, but it's
best you don't.
Just don't. But I think I don't know. That's the joy of a movie like this, and this is okay. On one hand, everything is deconstruction, right? We're always sort of using this thing as a tool to get to some other kind of meaning. But on the other hand, we can look back at someone like Susan Sontag, who was like, don't dig around in this stuff too much, right? Look at how it's made. Pay attention to the beauty of it and just do that, right? Or at least just try to do that. And so, I don't know, have it both ways. That's what I say. What?
If there's any moral of this podcast, it's have it both ways.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about, Wiseman?
No, are we going to do a recommended if you like? All right.
Yeah.
Let's. Why don't you kick those off?
Okay.
Because mine are like kind of all over the place in this case, but
so are mine, and this is kind of fun. If you like The Hidden Fortress, right? Here's my recommendation: the 2001 film version of Waiting for Godot.
Okay.
The Irish film. So, yeah, I mean, you see like these two kind of characters who are, on one hand, buffoons and who constantly insult each other, but are also lifelong friends, lifelong companions.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
All right. I like that.
Yeah.
I went with In Bruges.
Okay.
I mean, that's not really but I like the dynamic. If I could say that word, I would like it even more. The dynamic of Farrell and what's his face, and so it's just that kind of, I don't know. It really doesn't match. But I was like,
Gleason,
I don't want to.
Brendan Gleeson.
Yeah, I don't want to like look. Go out and watch all the Kurosawas. I mean, like,
right.
He's a master for a reason, and you're not going to find one that you're. I mean, like, going to be turned off. In fact, I would almost say like The Hidden Fortress takes a minute to get going. Like it's a little long on the beginning side because when you're dealing with two rogue characters, which I think the comedy plays better in 58 than it does in 2023.
True. Yeah.
Like there's it's compelling, but it takes a minute to get to Princess Yuki, and so I found myself watching it this time with a crowd, like, and I always do this with movies, especially with the ones that we're presenting. Is like I'm always like until I can.
Are they gonna like it?
Like let's get this. Come on, guys, let's get the story going. Let's go.
Are they gonna like this movie? Are they going to like me?
Right, which is the fucking.
Because if they don't like this movie, they don't like me. Look, Jason,
there's a corner over here. I'm just gonna ball up and cry.
There are plenty of movies that you like that I don't like, and I still like you.
I appreciate that. I really do.
But I think we're both responding to the sort of the duo in this film, and how that duo works. Okay, for Master Gardener, I recommended 2014's The Drop, starring Tom Hardy, Noomi Rapace, and James Gandolfini.
Oh, I have seen that. Yes, I did like that. Yeah.
Tom Hardy is a similar type character, and what I mean is sort of like an isolated man who ends up connecting with this woman who, in a way, kind of leads to his growth, redemption, whatever you like there. I don't know. I like that film. Written by Dennis Lehane, directed by Michael Roscom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And mine was 2015's The Guest, written and directed by Joel Edgerton.
It's so that is a really good film.
Yeah.
Jason Bateman plays the biggest dickhead in the world, and it's so great. It's so great. I was wondering if that was going to come up. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really, I always forget that he wrote and directed it until I go back and look at it again. But it's so good.
Oh,
it's so much fun.
Edgerton has done, he's good.
Yeah.
I think he's a really underrated actor and director, in my opinion.
He kind of, like, I agree with you. I think he falls into that generic, like, we have a set of generic white dudes right now that just kind of like all like, not Oscar Isaac, but so it's Edgerton and who the heck, Tom Hardy.
Sure.
Tom Hardy kind of looks the same.
Similar haircuts.
Sam Worthington to a much lesser degree.
Sure.
But there's these guys that kind of like just fall into this like, oh, okay, who am I looking at again? Like who? Like it's the Dermot Mulroney.
I was going to say, is that Dylan McDermott or is it Dermot Mulroney? I do think all of these guys, well,
except for Sam Worthington, yeah, don't put him in there.
I think Hardy and Edgerton really do transform into their roles, and I'm thinking of like Edgerton in this, Edgerton in, yeah, Edgerton. Wait, wasn't it The Gift?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, it was The Gift. I'm sorry. The Guest is something else.
Anyway, like we knew what we were.
Again, you can't. An hour and 55 minutes of the podcast. I'm going to sundown.
But you were worried if we were going to get to 2 hours.
That's true.
We've done really well today. I've been trying to pick up Jason's completely just kind of like, why am I here?
This
today?
is why
it's like, come on, man.
Brock is all hunched over because he's been carrying my ass the entire podcast.
Anyway, so I think Edgerton really transforms into these different kind of roles that he takes on. And, okay, so for Enys Men, my recommendation, 1943 short film Meshes of the Afternoon.
I have not seen that.
Oh, it's really directed by Maya Deren, and I guess her husband Alexander Hackenschmidt gets directorial credit, but I think she died fairly young, fairly soon after this. But this is very much a woman in a dream state, kind of seeing herself and seeing another robed figure with a mirrored face, and there's this knife, and there's a sense of danger, but then like no danger really happens, or it's averted, but there's like repetition. She sees herself kind of going, in this loop. So it's an really fucking trippy, and I'm not going to do it justice because I don't know how to describe it, right? But there are those parallels of sort of dream state repetition.
Have you ever seen that short film? I'll have to look it up, and I'm not going to find the name of it, but it's about this woman who realizes that she's in a commercial for like Pizza Hut or something. No, it's Red Lobster. She realizes that she's in a Red Lobster commercial, and she has to start repeating her. So like she has these lines that she has to say, and then as soon as the Red Lobster commercial's over, she's back into it. And it's like this whole it's this parable for addiction. But what happens is that if she doesn't say her lines, all the other characters start freaking out. And so she has to like kill the waiter in order to break this cycle, I'll find it for you.
Oh my
and
God.
post
Yeah,
it,
that
but
sounds amazing.
It's really,
That
really
sounds
cool.
incredible. Meshes of the Afternoon is on the Criterion
Okay.
channel, so you can, you and listeners can find it there.
And my last one, I was gonna do Don't Look Now just because of the red jacket, but seemed a little too on this. I'm gonna do really kind of a twofer, but In the Earth or an a Field in England with by Ben Wheatley.
Yeah. So he was another director that I thought of, like watching this.
Right. So yeah, I mean, which is again, I still can't get over that Ben Wheatley is directing the Meg 2. It must be some sort of tax issue, or like he owes Statham has naked pictures. Like I don't understand.
We all know Statham has naked pictures, at least of himself.
Right. Why wouldn't he? I would if I was Statham. I mean,
I do.
but Ben Wheatley has that kind of look. I mean, there's nothing really like Enys Men from a perspective like a long form that I can really think of. I mean, aside from Skinamarink, which I don't want to recommend. But this kind of, like I said before, ethereal, like just kind of mind trip. But Wheatley kind of comes closest as far as like these classified as horror, non-horror films that are kind of brainy and trippy and. But if you haven't seen Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now, go see that as well. It's a beautiful movie with Sutherland and Christie, and it's a classic. So
Julie Christie's so.
That whole movie is amazing, but like, obviously that the scene between them is they're, dressing and undressing at the same time. And it's that Rogue was, Rogue's Walkabout coming to Criterion, this next month, I think. So
September.
Is it September that they said?
They just announced the September releases.
Interesting.
But Rogue in general is a trippy filmmaker. I mean, The Witches, Walkabout, Performance. I mean, all of these are really interesting, weird.
What do you think about La Bamba hitting the Criterion releases?
Hey, good for Richie Valens.
Esai Morales and
good for Esai Morales, who was also in Master Gardener, and good for the guy who played Richie Valens,
Lou Diamond Phillips.
I don't know. I mean,
it's a movie that I watched a lot when it came out.
When I was a kid, yeah.
Because I mean, it was one of those ones I could just go to the dollar theater, and it came up a lot, and like it was, I don't know, it just doesn't. Aside from it being a biopic, which it also. Is it really that insightful, or is it really peeling back any onions from from like Valens' life? I mean, the worst thing that happened is he's got a drug addict brother,
and he won the coin toss.
Right, he won the coin. But he faced racism because of his white girlfriend, and he grew up poor, and he had I don't know. I don't want to diminish it. But I just don't understand why. Like, I understand why certain movies get Criterion releases just because they're going to bring money into Criterion, right?
Sure.
So I mean,
like Wall-E,
right? Or Armageddon, or RoboCop, or these movies that, and you can make an argument for certain ones. But I mean, the reason that Armageddon got a Criterion DVD release it was because Criterion was hurting and they needed somebody. Yeah. They needed money to come in, so that's why The Rock gets one and things like that. Not to diminish any Bay lovers out there or whatever, but. I don't know.
Embrace the Bayham.
Like, who is, of all of the movies that we're talking about, like, there's not were we clamoring for La Bamba and an in-depth dive of La Bamba? I don't know who directed La Bamba, and I don't know why I'm saying La Bamba so much, otherwise the song does. But is their career one that we're going to start digging into? I can't imagine that being the case because I don't know who the fuck it is.
Right. And are we going to have like a Lou Diamond Phillips Renaissance?
Right.
I don't know.
Fine. It's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, if you want me to sign up for an Esai Morales surge, I'm all for it. But I don't know. It was a really, really bizarre entry to me.
Yeah, me too. Because I don't remember the last time I really even thought about La Bamba. So Luis Valdez is the director. He also directed the TV movie The Cisco Kid. I can't wait
for the Criterion release of that.
So
nothing else really, right? So like, who's calling for La Bamba? I mean, and like of musical biopics, like I would just think you'd go back further, right? You could do the Buddy Holly story, and there's other like I don't know, Carpenter's Elvis. Like there's just movies that are more interesting to me than than La Bamba.
Yeah.
And it's weird.
I don't know. I have no answers for you there.
Can we call Mr. Criterion?
Yeah, I think Mr. Criterion is always one to take our phone calls. I think he cares about what we have to say. I think and not just us, even though like we do, as far as where we rank on the hierarchy of people he cares about, we're up there pretty high. But I think he cares about all prospective viewers and cinema lovers. And in general, I believe that there's a 1-800 number that goes like directly.
I'm pretty sure it's 1-800-Criterion, right?
Yeah,
I mean, too many letters, but
1-800 Mr. Criterion. It's his own special switchboard.
Right.
He's on Twitter, right? Is he doing TikToks?
We crossed 2 hours. It's
Jason, tell the people what we're going to get into next time.
Next time we're going back to D-double-G, and we're going to his stoner land. We're going to be watching The Sitter. We're going to be watching Pineapple Express, and we're going to be watching Your Highness. Not necessarily in that order, but we'll be watching those. We'll be talking about them. And we'll be talking about one of the most inexplicable movie director careers that I can think of, really, in recent history.
It's really strange.
But we'll bounce back next time.
But again, this is an interesting exercise, and that is why we are here.
That's why we were here. That's why you called us to do this, right? This is, and so we're doing it for you.
No, 100% we're doing it for you, listener. The one listener out there.
You know, it's funny because we didn't watch all of Schrader. We'll end up watching all of David Gordon Green's films. We did not watch all of Schrader's films.
I know. And I do want to make clear to people who are listening that this was Jason's idea.
Look, man, on paper it sounded...
No, I think it is an interesting exercise. Seriously. Go ahead.
When we do Sarah Polley, did you see what Sarah Polley just got signed up for?
No.
The live-action remake of Bambi.
Oh, fuck me.
So does that make it more interesting to you because she's going to be helming it? Or?
No. No. I hate these live action things.
There's no reason to do Bambi, right? It's going to be animated. You're not going to hire a deer. Although
look, there might be deer out there who need work.
I'm sure there are. I
hope they bring in a special deer writer as well.
What would make that more interesting to you? What could possibly get you into the
nothing.
Scenes? Like if people were dressed up as deer? Like if you hired like Bill Maroney.
and Dylan McDermott.
Dylan McDermott is Thumper.
Yes.
And Bill Maroney is Bambi. Flower. Okay, yeah. And we get Amy Schumer to be Bambi.
Bambi's mom. Amy Schumer's Bambi's mom.
Right. And we'll get Zendaya to be Bambi. That seems right.
I mean, in all seriousness, I do not care about these live action remakes. I don't care. I am not, and again, I'm not even a fan of animation. Right? And that's not to disparage it. If you like adult animation or even if you like regular animation. I mean, look, I like cartoons. I like Bugs Bunny. I mean, the problematic sort of like racist tropes and Tom and Jerry and stuff notwithstanding, but I like this stuff, right? But I'm not going to spend 90 minutes to 2 hours, invest in this. But I just don't care about these live action remakes.
It's going to be drug out to a 2 hour long,
and it's going to look like shit. Probably
it's going to look like shit. Little Mermaid looked fucking terrible.
Look, and why? And I get money. Okay, I get it, but why are these directors doing these fucking movies? Right? Like, why is she doing a live action remake of Bambi? Why?
What are you going to bring to the story?
Why? Right. And why did Chloe Zhao do the Eternals? Why? I don't know. I just don't get it. Look, I think we have just talked about a couple movies today and a couple filmmakers who are showing you that you can do things on different budgets and maintain. No, now I just sound like fucking self-righteous, but you can maintain a kind of like artistic principle and artistic sensibility without having to do these things where you're controlled by the studio.
Not only that is, again, given on a finite timeline and of what you can and can't accomplish, does Bambi open up? I just picture the fucking poster from the director of Women Talking comes Bambi. starring Dolman Maroney as
Flower. Dylan McDermott as Thumper.
And their pictures are actually reversed. Wait a minute, which one?
And someone's like, no, isn't it? Isn't that?
And they're not.
That's
even
Dylan McDermott, right? No. Oh wait.
But yeah, a timeline of you only have so much to do in this world. Is this what you want to do? And I guess people need summer homes. I mean, and whatever. I don't. It's all. It's weird and disappointing all at the same time. But again, I don't begrudge Baumbach or Gerwig to do Barbie either. Though I guess that's
okay. So I think that's a different kind of conversation, and I hope that we take some time to talk about Barbie after we've seen it. But I do think that is an opportunity to do something different with that. And by all accounts, the production companies that got involved made sure that Baumbach and Gerwig had some freedom to do some. I mean, you heard about, Amy Schumer dropped out because it wasn't feminist there was no feminist angle on this film. By all accounts, now there is. Of course, this is not having seen it yet, but
right.
I mean, I can't imagine, Greta Gerwig's going to be like, yes, Barbie is just a housewife. Right? So,
right.
But so I think there's an opportunity to do something different there. I don't know what your opportunity is with the live action Bambi when you've got Disney who's going to be like, yeah, you can't do that.
Right.
You can't. No, Bambi is clearly a white deer. I know, right?
Just not a, maybe, yeah.
This is not about DEI, okay, Sarah Pauly?
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think we've just talked about there's room to make these kind of films that aren't, big tent, IP. So,
well, there you go.
Have some fucking integrity, people.
I know you guys are waiting with bated breath for Your Highness. We'll get to it very, very soon.
And
I know Brock is waiting. look, we'll record in a couple of weeks. Brock will watch this exactly 2 weeks
13 and a half days before from now.
He's like, fuck, I'm up against it. It's like, all right, it's 2:00.
Well, but I have to go. So I'm going to visit family, starting in a couple days, and I'll be there for a little longer than I usually go visit family. So there will be plenty of time for me to go, you know what? I have to go watch this movie.
Sorry.
Like, why? So I have a podcast.
I don't know if you heard about it.
I don't know. Have I told you about my podcast? Lots of people told me I'm naturally funny. I should have a podcast. So I'll have excuses to go watch these stupid fucking
And I'd invite you to watch it with me, but I've got to lock in and really, I've got to find an artistic angle.
Look, I have to find an artistic angle, an existential angle, a phenomenological angle, and I have to take notes.
See, Jonah Hill is a babysitter to these kids who don't want to be babysat. I don't know if you like.
So do you get the metaphor there?
Get it?
Do you get the metaphor there, Mom?
Look, you're not going to get it, okay? You just don't. You don't understand.
Look, it's after your time.
Right.
All right. You're too old. There's nothing ageist about this podcast.
All right.
Okay.
Let's wrap it up.
All right. So that'll be next time. And I don't know. Until then, thank you all for listening.
And you know what to do. Keep screaming. You have been listening to Why Does the Wilhelm Scream with your hosts, Brock and Jason. If you liked today's episode, do us a favor and rate, review, and subscribe in whatever application you use to consume podcasts these days. You can reach us by visiting whydoesthewilhelmscream.com. If you are in the DFW area, we would love to see you at a Fort Worth Film Club event. You can learn more about those and find a full schedule at fortworthfilmclub.com. And you can learn about my foundation and how we are trying to foster the next generation of film lovers at realhousefoundation.org. That's REEL housefoundation.org. Till next time,